ChatGPT is saving instructional designers a ton of time, and that's why in this video I'm going to show you what it is and how to use it so that you can make a much bigger impact as an instructional designer. So if you're new to ChatGPT, then you are in for a treat because you're about to see the magic that this tool is capable of. I have a lot of examples lined up for you where we can see how we're going to use this for storyboarding, idea generation, and a lot of other stuff. And I'm even going to get into some advanced use cases at the end for those of you who have been using ChatGPT for a while. So no matter where you're at with this tool, there's going to be some good stuff for you here. And I would say if you haven't used ChatGPT at all, then go to chat.openai.com. I'll share that link in the description and create an account and maybe even play around with ChatGPT while you're watching this video. Like, this is a very good tool to get on board with. And like I said, there is massive time saving potential with many common ID tasks. So let's just dive right into it. So what is ChatGPT? One way to think about it is as a very advanced form of autocomplete. So like when you're texting on your phone or using some of these new Google apps like Google Docs or Google Slides, you'll notice it starts completing the words for you. ChatGPT is kind of like that, but times a million because it's trained on a vast amount of data, kind of like the entire internet worth of data. And it is really smart at understanding the context of like what you're asking for and what you want from it. But why it's like autocomplete is it basically guesses the probability of the next word it should generate, and it can generate tons and tons of words that all make sense contextually, like in that fashion. So it's kind of like autocomplete, but really smart. And again, was trained on a ton of data. So it is a smart cookie to say the least. So let's just look at it in action and let's look. This is ChatGPT here. So again, create an account if you haven't already. Like you need to get hands-on with this. But let's see what ChatGPT has to say about ChatGPT. So we can say, hey, explain ChatGPT to me like I'm 5 years old. And then here we go. Sure thing, kiddo. So this is all, again, artificially intelligently generated. You know, this is AI if you're brand new to this. But I realized this description was kind of too long. I'm not going to read this description to you. It wasn't what I wanted. So it's kind of like a chat conversation. So I say, try again, but explain it to a professional instructional designer and use an analogy that they would be familiar with. Your language should still be concise and conversational, and your total response should be no longer than one paragraph. So you can see how I can give it some more details to get closer to what I'm looking for. So it's like a nice little virtual assistant in that way. And then ChatGPT says, absolutely. You can think of this as an interactive digital textbook, much like how I use multimedia. And again, you can pause and read this if you want, but this was still like too instructional design-y for me. I'm like, this isn't exactly what we're going for. So I said, try again, but explain it to an average adult instead of a professional instructional designer. And this is what we're going for. ChatGPT, you can think of ChatGPT as a digital pen pal, can't read today, that's incredibly well read. It's like having a conversation with someone who has read a vast library of information, books, articles, websites, you name it. You can ask it questions, have it explain concepts to you, or even write stories. So there you go. You can read the rest of this if you like, but that is a good way to think about it. This really smart friend or assistant, more like an assistant for professional purposes, who has tons of information at its disposal. And it, again, is really smart and near instant. Like, again, I've generated this stuff for you, so you don't have to watch me typing stuff out for this demo, but play around with this. This stuff gets generated like within seconds. It's not like you need to wait around for a response. So very impressive. All right. So how do we use ChatGPT? So you've got a little demo of some of the techniques I've been using there, but I'm just gonna share some here, and then when we look at more examples, you'll see all of this in practice. So we want to tell ChatGPT what its role is. So you are a professional instructional designer who's going to help me write a storyboard, for example. You want to make it really clear what you're asking ChatGPT for in that moment. You can also tell it to ask you questions if it needs more information. And I'm going to just go back into the examples because I think that's where the real good stuff is. So if you are brand new to ChatGPT, notice on the left here, this is just one of these conversations. You can have many of these different conversations open at once, and the different conversations will hold their own context. So obviously, as I try again, it knows what all of these previous messages said so that it knows what I'm actually asking it to do. If I were to, say the same message in a different thread, I'm going to get something very different. So it is contextual in that way. All of the previous messages help inform what the next response will be. So it can keep up with the conversation in that way. So I have all of these different ones open. I opened them in tabs up here. I'm going to go to this conversation where I wanted ChatGPT to help me generate a storyboard. So notice here I give it this role. You are a corporate instructional designer who needs to create a course on instructional design best practices, right? We tell it its role and we tell it what our goal is, creating a course on ID best practices. Generate the first page of a storyboard for this course in a table format. So notice I'm being precise there, not just generate a storyboard, generate the first page of a storyboard. So we want to be nice and specific in a table format. The columns should include, so on and so forth. The storyboard will be given to a developer who will develop develop the course, it should say, and articulate Storyline 360. So programming notes should work in that tool. So notice it starts trying to develop this storyboard, but then here in this cell here, it starts listing these bullet points and it kind of breaks the table format. Not sure why it did that. We obviously don't want it to do that. So then I send a message, try again, but do not use bullet points because they broke the table format. So you can kind of talk to it like a person in that way, like it will understand what you're asking it for. And then how nice, ChatGPT apologized. And then now we get this in an actual table format. So let's look at how this is. So we have the title of the slide. We have some content on the screen. It's welcoming us to the course. And then visual notes, logo of the company, animated arrow pointing to the next button. And then some programming notes about, colors, font, error animation. This isn't perfect. This definitely is not perfect. I would not suggest using a simple prompt like this to generate an entire storyboard. It's probably not going to go over well. But this is just like at a base version, not terrible, right? Like maybe you can get some ideas from this. Like, let's look at another slide. What is instructional design, right? Visual notes, image of a brain with gears working inside, animate the gears turning. Kind of silly, kind of rudimentary, but still interesting to see. For slide 4, on the importance of instructional design, it suggests using icons to represent efficiency, effectiveness, and appeal. So I just want to show you another example of how you can keep asking follow-up questions to get more specific. You can say, or I said, for slide 4, what should the icons look like, right? Like that might not be clear to me. What is an icon representing efficiency? So then it tells you the efficiency one should be a clock or stopwatch with motion lines indicating fast speed. For effectiveness, it should be a bullseye or target. So again, this is just one example, but you can see how this kind of thing can start being useful in an instructional design context. So I'm going to hop back over here. You can also tell it which tone to use. I think you saw me do that in the first example, like use a conversational, concise tone. That's generally what I'm telling ChatGPT to use. And you can give it parameters. So again, you saw that in the first example, right? Like, do this. The total response should be no longer the one paragraph. So parameters like that really help because you don't want to get stuff that's super long, especially if you're using this to save time, and especially when it comes to summaries and things like that. You also can give it context. So again, giving it context around the goal, around the audience that you're serving, and so on and so forth. The more information that you include with the prompt, generally speaking, the better ChatGPT will be able to give you the kind of response that you're looking for. If you just give it like a one sentence, really basic prompt, it's going to be a pretty generic output that you get. And this is one of my favorite things to do. Actually, no, we're gonna get there soon, but ask it to try again if it gets something wrong or if you need more information. And you've already seen me do that a lot in these examples. If you type in a prompt and it gives you something and you're like, oh, this isn't great. Like, this tool is lame. I'm just going to go do something else. You can keep the conversation going. Tell it what you need. You're basically training ChatGPT in a sense, in each one of these threads that you create. You're training it to respond to what you're looking for each new time you start a new chat. So don't be afraid to do that. So I want to show you how we can use these ChatGPT best practices to take this storyboard example forward and get closer and closer to what we're looking for. And again, I think these practices alone will help you go much further in your ChatGPT journey. So here is the next prompt I started with. So I started a new chat And I said, you are a corporate instructional designer who needs to create a course on ID best practices. Your audience includes new IDs at a large tech company. The course should take 15 minutes to complete. The output should be in table format. So you can see here, I'm telling it its role. I'm telling it what our goal is to create this course. I'm telling it who the audience is and where they work. And I'm giving some other parameters and context. So the course should take 15 minutes to complete. The output should be in a table. The columns should include. So you notice we're getting very, very specific here. The storyboard will be given to a developer, right? You're already familiar with this, but I also give some other details. Ensure that any interactivity is intentional. In other words, it helps the learner practice and assess the knowledge and skills that they're learning. Also ensure that none of the animations or visuals are distracting. So I'm kind of like trying to teach it, hey, here's how to be a good instructional designer. Follow Mayer's multimedia principles when generating the storyboard. And then finally, take your time, work on it step by step, and ask me any questions in case you need more information. I've seen this shared as a best practice, like telling it to kind of take its time and work through this piecemeal. You can do some additional research on that if you like some prompting best practices. Prompt engineering is like the term that everyone's using for this type of thing. But I just sent a lot at it to see what it came up with, and I would say it's a little better than the first one, right? Like we have nice content on screen listed here. We have this narration and voiceover and some visual notes, gentle fade in of the logo and text. Bullet points appear one by one as they're narrated. Look at this, use Mayer's signaling principle, highlight each phase as it is discussed. So it can reference a subject matter expertise, like it can apply some of these principles. And this honestly isn't bad. Like, again, feel free to pause and read this or just try a prompt like that for yourself and see what it comes up with. But you're probably not just going to bring this into the storyline and develop it. You know, another example, applying ADDIE, scenario, text, and options for response. That's not really giving us a lot. Like, what is the text? What are the options for response? And as I've shown you, like, you can, of course, ask questions about this to get those questions and options in response. And we'll look at that in my favorite approach for working on stuff like this third example. Check this prompt out. So you are a corporate instructional design consultant who will help me create a storyboard for new instructional designers who need to learn how to apply ID best practices to create effective learning experiences. So pretty specific with the role I'm giving it and the context I'm giving of how it will help me and what our goal is. I need this course to be creative and engaging, and I will develop it using Articulate Storyline 360. Can you please ask me questions to ensure that you have the necessary information to help me write a development-ready storyboard? So this is one of my favorite things to do to make sure that I'm giving ChatGPT what it needs so that it can give me what I need. So this right here, can you please ask me questions to ensure you have the necessary info? That right there is going to really change the quality of what it is that you're getting out. So here we go. Absolutely. I'm happy to help you. Here are the questions I need to ask. So look at all this. What are the main learning outcomes you'd like? Can you tell me about the background of the learners? What topics will be covered? How long is the course? So this list goes on and on and on. A little weird thing is it goes like 7, 8, 9, 0, 1, 2, 3. That's okay. I'm obviously not going to read you all of this, but then I take the time to answer each one of these questions, right? I gave it some very basic learning objectives, right? I gave it some basic background on the audience, and I went through and I answered every single one of these questions that it asked me just by following the format it gave me, even though, again, it's 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, but it understands based on the pattern. And then it says, thanks, I'll help you craft the storyboard, and here we go. So now it's much more custom to our specific needs and goals with this course. So you can see here, right, scene by scene, I'm not going to read it, but it is more personalized to our audience. You can check it out if you want, but it's still at a kind of high level, right? You can notice, slide 3.1, overview of the ADDIE model, on-screen text and diagram. It doesn't tell you what that actually is. This is more of an outline, a higher level kind of thing. Look at this scene for Gagne's 9 events. Slide 4.1, overview. 4.2 to 4.10, detailed explanation of each event. Scenario-based learning. Interactive scenarios where they can apply each event in a real-world context. And it's saying that because that's one of the strategies I said it wanted to use if you go ahead and pause and read this if you want to. But so then what I did next, just to show you, can you generate a detailed storyboard in table format for slides 4.2 to 4.5? And these are like the Gagne's 9 events slides I just mentioned. Columns should include slide number, on-screen elements, narration, visual notes, and programming notes. And then it says, sure, here you go. So you can see how when we, let's see. So on-screen elements, right? We have the text description of event 1. We have this narration about Gagne's first event, and then illustrate with attention-grabbing iconography, button to be clearly highlighted. And programming notes, button triggers a layer or pop-up where a scenario related to gain attention is presented. So, and you can see how you can keep asking questions and getting more and more in depth with what you're going for. And I did that. I said, try again, but make it more specific. Include the exact text that should be included on the screen and explain what each icon or visual should look like. So here we go. Now we have the exact text that we could essentially be copying and pasting onto the screen. And then for visual notes, instead of, use a relevant icon, it says use an icon of a light bulb or an exclamation mark to signify the gaining of attention. So again, this is fairly rudimentary, and I would probably take this further and say, hey, we don't want all of this text on the screen and narration. Like, we want to rely more on visuals than text. But like I said, you're essentially training these different ChatGPT chats based on your needs and your expertise. So it's not replacing you in that way. Like, you do need to be a competent instructional designer because you are babysitting this tool essentially and just helping outsource some of the busy work or idea generation that might typically take you a long time, but you still need your expertise. That's still important, I would say. So hopefully those examples were pretty helpful. We're going to move on to some other use cases here, but again, it's not perfect, but hopefully this helps you see how you can use a tool like this for common ID tasks. All right, so here are the list of use cases as I've seen them. And if you have other ways you've been using it, please share them with us in the comments, because we're all looking for ways to use this to help us save time and be more effective as IDs. So research and ideation, I think that is a great way to use ChatGPT, especially when because of some of the limitations we'll get into a bit later. Course design, of course, right? Writing learning objectives, storyboards, all of that good stuff. Job searching and portfolio work, and communication. And we're going to take a deeper look into each one of these 4 primary categories of use cases. All right, so research and ideation. You can essentially ask ChatGPT about topics you'd like to learn more about, similar to how you'd be Googling something. But ChatGPT is nice because you can really have it like dumb things down for you if you want it to. And you already saw that example with the ChatGPT explanation, how we went from explaining it like I'm 5 to, explaining it to me like an average adult. Here's another example with Kubernetes, and I can't even explain this to you. It's just like a complex topic I've come across in like one of the courses I was developing one time. So I said, can you explain it to me like I'm in 8th grade by using an analogy? Please respond in 1 paragraph or less. And it gives an analogy about controlling a bunch of toy cars. Kubernetes is a smart traffic cop for these cars. And I'm like, okay, that's nice, but I feel like that's like too simple, right? Like I still don't fully know what this is in a useful way for designing a course with that analogy. I said, can you write a poem about Kubernetes to help me understand? And this is really just a demo that you can do this kind of stuff. You can say, write me a song by Eminem about Kubernetes, and it will do that, and it will sound like an Eminem song. So try, you can even try asking it to write songs or do things in styles of artists that you like, and it's pretty amazing what will come out. So I'm not going to read this poem to you, obviously, but it rhymes. It's well done. It can be quite creative on those kind of tasks. I said, now explain it to me like I'm an average adult, because that still wasn't really helping me. And this is too technical, right? Open source container orchestration platform. I don't know what that is. I don't have that background. So I said, try again, but explain it to me like I know nothing about software development. And even if you do, right, you can use prompts like this to get it to simplify things and try different ways. And this explanation was a lot better. You have a bunch of different tasks you need to complete, but they're complex. Instead of doing each task manually, you have a smart assistant called Kubernetes to help you out. It's a personal organizer or project manager for your tasks. And I'm not going to read this to you, but I just want to show you what a workflow like this might look like, where you are trying to make sense of a topic, especially if you're like designing a course on some kind of like technical software or engineering topic and you're new to it. Of course, lean on your subject matter experts. Definitely do not rely on what you're getting from ChatGPT alone, because it can like hallucinate or give you some inaccurate information. We're going to talk more about that when we get to the limitations. But it can help a lot make sense of stuff. We'll look at some more, but sorry, I'm obviously pretty excited about the ChatGPT and like AI stuff in general. So I'm like getting ahead of myself, but Another way to use this for research and ideation is to ask for ideas about projects you're working on or problems you're trying to solve. I love using ChatGPT for this. It's honestly probably one of the best use cases, and look at how awesome this is. So, I told ChatGPT, you're an instructional design consultant who specializes in designing engaging, award-winning e-learning experiences. I'm working on a course about cybersecurity, and I need your help making it really wow my audience. Can you list 5 suggestions about how I can make the e-learning experience more unique and engaging? It gives me some suggestions. I'm not going to go through them all, but basically, gamification, interactive scenarios, rich multimedia, so on and so forth. So I was interested in the gamification piece. And it mentioned some examples: quizzes, challenges, leaderboards, rewards, badges. Not very helpful in and of itself, but then I say, can you list 5 relevant ways that I could gamify the learning experience by giving specific examples that relate to the subject matter of my course? So again, I hope you see I'm using some of those strategies, right? I want it to be more specific. I want more context. I'm saying list 5 ways instead of just tell me some ways, because I want to give it some of those parameters. And then here we go. Certainly, here are 5 ways. And these ideas are honestly pretty awesome, if you ask me. Like cybersecurity challenge levels. Divide your course into different levels or missions, each representing a specific cybersecurity concept or skill. As they go through, they unlock new content and face more complex challenges. Virtual hacker hunt. Create a virtual scavenger hunt where learners have to find hidden vulnerabilities or security flaws in a simulated environment. I mean, that sounds fun. Security quests and badges, right? A series of quests or missions related to different cybersecurity topics, and you get a virtual badge for each achievement. Honestly, not a bad idea. Cybersecurity escape room and cybersecurity trivia showdown. So feel free to pause this if you want, or again, try prompts like this for yourself, but pretty impressive, right? Like the idea generation stuff is pretty sweet. And if you're not going to use it for anything else, this is at least a good way to use it if you want to kind of up your game as an instructional designer and design more engaging stuff. Pretty good for that. I was excited when I saw it, as you can tell. And then another way to use it for research and ideation is to ask ChatGPT to summarize content. So this is where I was getting ahead of myself, right? Like, ChatGPT can hallucinate information sometimes, but one way to help that is to kind of feed it the source information you want it to work with. So, for example, here I just kind of copied some content from this Wikipedia article about instructional design. And at first I just copied and pasted the entire article. And I was like, I want you to summarize this. But then it comes back and says, hey, this is too long. We can't work with that. And we'll get into some of the limitations around length a bit later in the video. But I essentially wound up having to just copy this models section. So I said to ChatGPT, can you please summarize the following article in 2 paragraphs or less? Your tone should be conversational and your word choice should be suitable for an 8th grade student. Here is the article. And then I just pasted it in directly from Wikipedia. And then here we go. We get a summary, right? The ADDIE model, here's what it stands for. Here's what we do in each phase. As you can tell, it's not 2 paragraphs. So sometimes ChatGPT just doesn't want to listen to what you're asking for it. And you have to kind of keep working with it in that way. So I said, please try again, but restrict your summary to 1 paragraph. So, hey, yeah, it discusses instructional design models, including ADDIE, which, gets into what ADDIE does. Another one is rapid prototyping, and it gives a brief explanation. It essentially did summarize this pretty well. I have a nice sentence about each one of these models, and I can do that instead of reading this entire thing. So that's just a quick example. Obviously, you're going to be summarizing stuff that's a lot longer than this piece that I copied and pasted, but you can imagine how, as an instructional designer, if you're given a PDF or you're given some PowerPoints that don't make a lot of sense to you, you can put some of that content into ChatGPT and get summaries or get it rewritten in ways that are easier for you to process or understand, and maybe even ways that you can then present it to your learner. Of course, there are some potential privacy and security risks with this, which we will get to in limitations. Maybe I should have started with limitations since it's coming up so much. But we're moving along. So you can also use ChatGPT for course design. And this is some of the biggest time-saving potential, I would say. So you can use it to generate learning objectives. And we, of course, have to take a look at that. So here's the prompt. You are an instructional designer with 20 years of experience and a PhD in instructional systems and learning technologies. This is important, and I'm going to give some context here. ChatGPT by default is not very good at generating learning objectives, right? Like I've tried it on my own and they want to say things like, oh yeah, understand this or learn this or know this. Luke Hobson did some content about this too and was dealing with similar issues. So yeah, ChatGPT doesn't really write learning objectives like an instructional designer should be writing learning objectives, because you learn in Instructional Design 101 to avoid those vague, fluffy verbs when it comes to learning objectives. So I've seen people mentioning different strategies for how they go about it. I'll link to some other content and resources from other creators who have been working on this ChatGPT and ID stuff in the description, so you can check it out. But I figured I would take a shot at using an approach like this, just with being very well defined about the role, because an instructional designer with that experience and a PhD is not going to make those very amateur mistakes when it comes to learning objectives. So that was my hypothesis. And then I said, I need your help writing learning objectives for a course that I'm developing on ID best practices. Please list 3 to 5 learning objectives that would be suitable. So I said, certainly, sure, yeah, here we go. It was too much, right? I don't want to read all of this. I want this to save me time. I'm not trying to make sense of whatever format this used. So here's another potentially more advanced technique, I guess you can call it. I said, try again, but use the following format. Each learning objective should replace an X in the following format, and each learning objective should be no longer than 1 sentence. So I'm essentially telling it I want you to use this format. I'm sure there are more concise ways to put this, but I just want it to be very clear to the AI that I want you to replace these X's with 1 sentence long learning objectives, and they should be completing this stem, right? This is much more aligned with how we would write them as IDs. And then I even gave an example. So this is something you can do and something that will help a lot in the quality of the output that you get from ChatGPT. So I said, for example, an appropriate response may look something like this. By the end of the course, learners will be able to, and then notice I've replaced those X's with, simple learning objectives, straightforward 1 sentence learning objectives. All right, so ChatGPT apologized and then gave the list of revised learning objectives. By the end of this course, learners will be able to analyze and evaluate different ID models for their suitability in diverse learning contexts, conduct a needs assessment, design and develop effective learning materials, and the list goes on. This should be broken down further. Again, this is a very big learning objective. This could be kind of like a learning goal for an entire learning program, but I would hope, with some of these strategies that we've been discussing, you can see how we could kind of break each one of these down further and further and further to get closer and closer to what it is that we're looking for and get more information from ChatGPT. All right, we can also use it to create course outlines. Again, that's pretty similar to what we've already been looking at. We can use it to generate learning activity ideas. So similar to how we use that idea generation example, you can do that for learning activities, role-playing exercises, so on and so forth. You can write content for your storyboards and scripts. Again, huge time saver if you get a good conversation going where ChatGPT is giving you the type of stuff that you're looking for. You can use it to write character dialogue and case study details. I'm not going to go into examples of all of this stuff because it's going to get quite long and some of this stuff will be a bit repetitive, but using the strategies that you've already seen me covering, I hope will give you enough to start experimenting with these types of things. And you can use it to generate good multiple choice questions. This is a big one. This one is good, especially because some people have a hard time writing good distractors or just writing good multiple choice questions in general. So I think I'm going to do an entire video on how to use ChatGPT for writing good multiple choice questions. So I'm not going to dive too deep into it here. That one will be its own video, just like some of the other stuff we're going to look at. But that is a great way to use ChatGPT. All right, moving right along to job searching. So you can use it to revise your resume, to brand yourself as an ID, and present your experience in the best light. Joanna is going to do a full video on this in the channel, but you can imagine, right? If you've seen any of the resume content on this channel, we want to use it to help rewrite your resume to make it use more instructional design language and less like education language, for example, if you're coming from education, or just to highlight your achievements or your responsibilities in a better, more concise light. So there's a lot of different ways it can help you with your resume. You can also use it to generate custom cover letters for each role you apply to. I will say be careful with this. We're going to get into one of the limitations a bit later, but we don't want people just throwing away your materials because it's so obviously written by ChatGPT. And if you follow the suggestions I use here, and if you have the conversation, you get stuff more and more concise, you're not going to have that problem, right? Like some of the stuff you won't be able to tell is written by ChatGPT if you're using your human mind to guide it and your human critical thinking and attention to detail and all of that stuff. That's still necessary when you're working with this tool, right? Like it's just a tool. If you're just using ChatGPT, say, oh, generate me a cover letter. It's not going to be very good, right? You need to give it a lot more if you want something more unique and custom and personal out so that it's not, oh yeah, this is obviously generated by a robot, right? And to generate and revise portfolio content. So this can be literally outlining your entire portfolio homepage. This can be coming up with like your hero title text, I design and develop engaging e-learning, like those types of things. You can use it to develop something much more engaging or something much more personal to you, I should say, if you feed it the right prompts. And you can use it for your portfolio about page, for your process write-ups, even for portfolio project ideas. And Nicole is going to do an entire video on how you can use artificial intelligence, including ChatGPT and a host of other tools, to create a really good instructional design or e-learning portfolio. So that's coming next month. Definitely subscribe because, again, every week we're going to be sending more of this AI and ID content your way, and this is just the beginning. So definitely subscribe if you're interested. And then for communication, I'm sure you can imagine how this would be helpful too. You can use ChatGPT to write professional emails to subject matter experts, stakeholders, hiring managers, clients, colleagues. It can help you set boundaries in a professional tone in case like you're feeling like, more emotional or like unsure about something. You can adjust the tone of things either to make it more formal and professional or make it more casual and conversational if you want to go more in that direction. It's really good at rewriting stuff. And that can be helpful in like course design too, of course. If you want to use a more conversational tone in your courses, you can have it literally rewrite entire sections of content for you. And it does a really good job at that. This feels relevant. I was talking to one of my friends this week about ChatGPT and like asking if he was using it at all in his industry. And he's like, all the time. I use it to communicate with like some of our clients and like executives at those companies and stuff. And my supervisors are seeing me, are being CC'd on those messages and like seeing those emails. And they're like, wow, you are like so good at wording stuff. Like you are really, you're really on it with, just like your phrasing. Like, can you actually start drafting some of our emails that we need to send to these other executives and CEOs and stuff? So I just found that hilarious. Like my friend is getting praised for his communication, but he's literally using ChatGPT to generate everything that he's doing. He's like, doesn't even like identify as like a great writer or anything like that. So pretty cool how people are using these tools to kind of like stand out and do better at their jobs. All right, so you've heard me mentioning these limitations and risks quite a bit now. Let's get into them. So if you've been looking into ChatGPT much, you might have heard of the context length or the context window of these different models. And what it means is essentially how many words the model can handle in any given like request, right? So it's in terms of tokens, and a simple way to think about it is one token is about 3/4 of a word. So the context length for these ChatGPT models is between 3 and 24,000 words, depending on which version of ChatGPT you're using. And I should probably show you that. So let me actually pull that up here. So when you go to create a new chat in ChatGPT, as of when I'm recording this video, you can either use ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo or GPT-4. This one costs like 10 or 20 bucks a month or something like that, and it's more limited. You can only use 25 messages every 3 hours, but it is much more advanced. GPT 3.5 is less advanced, and by extension, it has a lower context window. So it's more around that 3,000 word mark. And then GPT-4, I don't know what it is right now. They're in the process of like expanding it, but at most 24,000 words, but I don't think they've like unlocked that for public in ChatGPT. The other difference is like whether or not you're using the API for like your own app. You can get some a bigger context window in your own app than using ChatGPT here in the browser. Now, why is that a problem, right? Like that's important. When you are talking to ChatGPT, right, when you have a message thread like this, your message and ChatGPT's response all go into that word limit. And then if you send another message, it's going to include this message and the previous one and the previous one. Okay, so as you go down the thread, ChatGPT is trying to hold all of this information, all of these words in its context window, right? So it's not just like, oh, every message you send has to be less than 3,000 words. It's the entire conversation has to fit in fewer than 3,000 to 24,000 words, depending on, a variety of those factors. So you can imagine that's a pretty big limitation, right? Like if I want to send it, a 30-page PDF and then start asking it a bunch of questions and asking it to generate a storyboard based on that PDF, I'm not going to have enough of a context window to do something like that. I'm going to run out of space. And what that looks like when in a chat conversation, like in ChatGPT, for example, is once it's past that context window limit, anything before that is just going to be getting cut off. So you might say in the beginning, here's what your goal is, here's what I want you to help me do. But if you send it too many messages, it's going to just like forget what that goal was, and it's going to start just immediately become much less helpful or useful. So that's something to keep in mind. That is a limitation. The good news is like researchers have identified how they can create a language model like this with 1 million token context window. So we're talking about going from 4,000 to 32,000 tokens to over 1 million tokens. And that's where it's obviously going to be much more powerful, and just being able to feed it a ton of information, ask it a ton of questions, and it has that context for every single question that you're asking it. So again, this is still early days, right? Like this stuff is happening fast, but the research is very promising, and this will be improving in the months and years to come. But just keep in mind that's a limitation now. Inaccurate info, right? Like you can probably see this. If we look at the bottom of ChatGPT, there's like a warning at the very bottom here, really small font. ChatGPT may produce inaccurate information about people, places, or facts. And it does that sometimes. Like it's commonly referred to as like, oh, ChatGPT just hallucinating things. That can happen. So take what you do get from ChatGPT with a grain of salt if you're relying on like factual information. And that's something that, they're working on. But right now, you can't just like, it's not like Google where, a lot of people look at stuff on Google and it's like, oh yeah, this is the truth. ChatGPT take with even more grain of salt than what you see on Google if you're relying on information. And then inconsistency. For the ChatGPT models that we have access to, not only can the responses vary from thread to thread, right? It might look a little bit different. That's okay. That's like kind of built into the tool. But they're also working on the model in the back end. So for example, in the recent weeks or like past month or so, people are saying, oh, GPT-4 has become like so much stupider, essentially. They're like, oh, it used to be so much better, but whatever they're doing on the back end, whatever updates they're doing has made it so much less useful than it was when it first came out. I don't know if this is like fully accurate, but a lot of people say this. And that's just something too. It's like this stuff is still new. It's still like, I don't know if it's technically in beta, but yeah, like it might operate differently one month than it does the previous month. And that changes once you start using the API, but at least for this like public ChatGPT interface that they make really accessible and really easy to use, it can be inconsistent depending on when you use it. And then again, I mentioned this as a limitation or risk just because like this is really not a good look. You don't want whatever you're generating with ChatGPT to be obviously generated by ChatGPT. Again, you can resolve that by using a lot of the strategies I shared in this video, but like I recently had a job application for my company, and a big focus of it was using tools like this. And a lot of like 50% or more of the responses to a certain question about like generating something in my voice, it was all essentially the same, and it was pretty obvious that everyone used ChatGPT for. It's like a human would not say this. Someone just kind of typed in a prompt to ChatGPT and then just copied and pasted it into the job application. So, and I've heard stories too about other hiring managers, like certain cover letters, if it's obviously generated by ChatGPT, it's kind of thrown into the trash. So use your critical thinking, like please don't just copy and paste this stuff. And again, use these techniques we've shared to make the output more personalized and more in line with like stuff you would actually say and stand behind. And we'll get into that more in later videos about, using ChatGPT to find jobs and stuff like that. And then I'm not going to get too deep into this because this could, of course, be like an hour-long video in and of itself. But this is the Wild West in a sense. There are regulatory concerns. There are security concerns, right? Like we don't have a lot of case law to deal with this stuff yet. We're not really sure how AI is going to be getting regulated. We're not sure what the like copyright and ownership situation will look like in the months and years to come. Right now, for the most part, a lot of these tools, what you generate from the tool, it's yours to keep. Whether or not that's going to change in the future, we'll have to see. And then a lot of companies are hesitant to use tools like this because, of course, they don't want to be uploading their private sensitive documents to servers that, aren't fully vetted by their companies and their security teams and all of that good stuff. So obviously use this at your own risk. Don't do anything that your company is going to be coming after you about. But again, if it's pretty safe if you're using it for like general idea generation and not sharing like confidential information, I would say, at least to my understanding. All right. So those are the limitations. If you can think of more or you have some insight into any of these, feel free to let us know in the comments because there are indeed limitations, right? This is still early days. So just to summarize these tips, break things down into smaller tasks. So it was pretty ambitious saying, oh, just generate me a storyboard. But we could probably see much better results if we could say, hey, help me get clarity on my learning goal. Now help me identify some learning objectives for this specific course. Now help me generate a course outline. And then now help me generate the storyboard. So if you go step by step by step like that, you're going to see much better results than, hey, yeah, just generate me a storyboard. And it gives you a chance to revise things and refine things as you go to make sure that you're in alignment with the AI before having it kind of try to spit out the final product, so to speak. Be clear about what you're looking for. Again, there's a lot of different ways we can do that, but generally speaking, more details are better. I hope the examples made that clear. And don't be afraid to keep the conversation going. Ask for what you want. Treat it like a conversation, not just a one-off prompt and response, right? This is a chat interface. Treat it like you would treat an assistant, essentially, or an employee or a team member who's there to help you do whatever ID tasks you want to do. Now, some juicy stuff. This is what I've been spending most of my time researching and getting hands-on with, the advanced use cases. This is really exciting to me. So you can use the API for further customization and incorporate it into other apps. So if you're new to an API, OpenAI basically said, hey, all of this technology, we're going to let you use this technology for your own applications, and you can actually customize it further to exactly what you want, and you're just going to pay us a fee based on how many times you kind of send requests to use our servers. And it's pretty affordable, relative to how impressive this technology is. So a lot of different companies and apps are all like building these like AI features and tools based off of ChatGPT. Well, based off of the OpenAI language models, to be like more precise, I guess. So there are a couple of cool things you can do. I mean, one of the simpler ones is you can tell the response how creative to be. So like the lower level, it'll spit out the same thing every time based on the input you give it. Or on the other end, it can be really, really creative. So it can come up with like less likely responses, if that makes sense. That's a really simple thing to do. But you can also use embeddings, something called embeddings if you're a developer and you want to look deeper into this, to give it long-term memory. So for example, if I want to train ChatGPT on every single piece of content I've produced, all of the content on my website and every single YouTube video on my channel, I can do that. I can essentially train ChatGPT on all of that information and data. And then if you ask it a question, I can have it respond based on citations in my content. And it's not going to hallucinate then. Like it's actually citing this information as a form of like long-term memory. And it can even tell you, yeah, here I cited this part of this YouTube video and this part of this article to come up with this response. And that's something that I would like to build if you would all find that interesting. And I can make that available, for free. So instead of having to research like on YouTube or on Google, you can kind of just ask Devlin AI and it will show you exactly where the relevant content is based on what you're asking. So that's a really cool use case that I'm looking into building. And then also you can fine tune models to teach them how to respond to certain prompts in line with what you're looking for. So this is where you basically say, hey, we're noticing the base ChatGPT it's not doing a very good job with learning objectives. So I'm going to feed it 500 sample requests for learning objectives and 500 responses for how those learning objectives should look. And I'm going to further train the model based on, some more specialized instructional design expertise that me or my team might have. So that, I think, is such an interesting area for instructional designers. Instead of training people, we are helping train literal artificial intelligence how to do these very specific tasks, and we can help them do it much better than these general large language models. So ton of opportunity there. That's why I'm so excited in building this like AI tool that I've mentioned, because we can make it much more specialized and powerful for instructional designers based on the further training and fine tuning and embeddings that we'll use. So if you're interested in that stuff and you're a developer, definitely look into embeddings and fine tuning. Really cool possibilities there. And again, that's what I'm really excited about. So if you're excited about that too, and you'd like to use a tool like that, one that is more customized and personalized for instructional designers, you can go ahead and type devlin.ai in your address bar and sign up for the waitlist. I'm going to be doing some surveys, some focus groups, making sure we're actually building something you want to see that's going to actually save you time and that you're going to use. So yes, join that waitlist. And in the weeks to come, we're going to start doing some of those surveys and focus groups. And in case you couldn't tell by this video, I am quite excited about what's possible there. And then, as I mentioned too, we have a lot more videos on how you can use different artificial intelligence tools in instructional design, and some more in-depth tools on how you can use ChatGPT for different common instructional design tasks. That's all coming. So if you're enjoying the AI content, please subscribe. That's the best way to let us know that you're enjoying this and to show your appreciation. And we will see you in the next video. I appreciate you making it to the end, and I hope you're as excited about this stuff as I am. See you next time.